Okay, good afternoon. The Design Review Board public meeting of May 25th, 2017 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones at this time. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You will be asked to speak by the board when your case is called. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project in the event of a return for redesign decision by the board must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive notice of subsequent meetings. Current Design Review Board agendas are available on our city's website at www.glendaleca.gov. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and Design Review Board appeals is available from staff. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Benlian.
Here.
Board Member Charchian is absent. Board Member Malikian.
Here.
And Board Member Simonian.
Present.
The report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on May 18th, 2017. Oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. I have no oral communication cards, and none have been submitted. Which brings us to staff announcements, and this concerns the first item on tonight's agenda, which is case number the address is 1819 Dearmont Road, the case being PDR 1702018. This item is being continued to the next Design Review Board date of June 8th, 2017, which leaves us with one item on the agenda, and I would like to turn the meeting over to Chairman Malikian.
Thank you. We don't have any cards for...
I have one.
Okay.
And I believe the applicant, Demery Matthews, will be filling out one and submitting it shortly, too.
Okay, so then if we are ready, we can go ahead and get started.
So the case planner is Milka Toledo.
All right.
So
Thank you.
More members of the board, this first item before you is the demolition of the existing buildings on site located at 2653 Manhattan Avenue. There is currently a one-story, 841-square-foot single-family house with a detached garage constructed in 1947, and the applicant is proposing to construct a new duplex. The project is located on a through lot, which means you have a dual frontage, one on Manhattan Avenue and one on the opposite street, which is Pickens Street. So one of the units will face Manhattan Avenue, and the second unit will face Pickens Street. And the design is a one structure. It's 2 stories in height, with attached garages facing each street. The total combined floor area for both units will be 3,332 square feet, and that does not include the attached 441 square foot 2-car garage. And the square footage of the lot is 7,022 square feet, and the project is located in the R3050 moderate density residential zone, which is multifamily. So in this case, the duplex is a permitted density based on the size of the lot. Proposed work, again, includes the demolition of the existing house and garage, the construction of the duplex. Each unit will have individual private open space designed as a patio on the ground floor. And there are several oak trees on the property, all of which will be preserved. And new driveway access, again, will be one from Manhattan Avenue and the other from Pickens Street. The existing stone wall at the street front facing Manhattan will remain largely intact, but will incur some modifications to enable the construction of the new driveway in this area. And the existing stone wall at the street front facing Pickens Street will be removed, but reused for the new planter wall in this area. As we know, stone homes or walls are character-defining features of this particular area, and hence the reason why the applicant is proposing to either reuse or preserve the stone walls and add stone to the building as well, which I'll go into further detail in my staff report. As far as the site planning, I'll briefly touch upon some of the bullet points. The two-story duplex is designed as one building, again with each unit having a private two-car attached garage, fully integrated with the overall structure and consistent with other residential buildings in the neighborhood. The duplex is designed as a rectangular building footprint, again consistent with the lot and appropriately set back from the front and sides per zoning regulations and the design guidelines. Each unit will have a private front entry porch facing the street, similar in general to a single-family house. And having these private patios on the ground floor is appropriate because it does respect the privacy of adjacent homes and not as opposed to having them on the second floor. The applicant has made an effort to design the building footprint that thoughtfully considers and avoids undermining existing oak tree roots and canopies. I won't go into too much detail because we also have our city arborist here in case there's any questions. But the western facade of the building is set back between 5 and 25 feet from the property line, and this generous setback will accomplish, again, preservation and viability of the trees. And there are 2 oak trees along the east side of the property where the building, again, is set back in order to respect the roots and the canopy of the trees. So overall, in terms of the site planning, the building is appropriately situated on the site and consistent with the neighborhood pattern. As far as the mass and the scale, through thoughtful use of application of material, the siding, articulation through windows, breaks and planes, roof, and other stone features and other details on the building, the applicant has been able to execute a very thoughtful building and well articulated. Some of the design in terms of the front facing Manhattan, as you can see, is not a mirror image of Pickens Street. And the applicant's here, she can explain why the difference of the 2 elevations. And one of them has to do with, specifically on the Pickens side, has to do with, again, respecting the roots of the trees as to why this design approach was the one that's presented before you today. But again, having the applicant here, she can go into more detail as to the thought process behind the Pickens Street elevation versus the Manhattan Street. And as far as some of the comments or conditions that staff is recommending, first of all, we are recommending approval with conditions. The 2 conditions that we're recommending is to submit a window detail, which is pretty standard, and submit cut sheets for the light fixtures, again, pretty standard. But as far as all the details that are identified on the building, is consistent with craftsman architecture, which once again gives that woodsy feel, which the property has now with the oak trees on the property, and again, proper execution of the design and taking into consideration in the existing oak trees and the landscape palette that is being presented. Staff feels that this project is consistent with the design guidelines and a good fit for the neighborhood as well. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Do we have any questions for staff?
I have a question.
We do.
Do we have an arborist report?
Yes, we do. And Jeremy Kahn is our city arborist, and he can go into more details regarding that.
I have a copy of it with me if you'd like to see it.
While this is happening, I have a couple of questions. So this is an R3050 zone.
Correct.
What is the maximum height allowed?
It would be 26 feet for a flat, but because this has a pitch, you get an additional, I believe, 5 feet overall.
So about 31 feet.
Correct.
And the setbacks?
It would be 30 for the front, No, I'm sorry, 25 for the front, and then for the sides, it will be minimum 5 foot with an 8-foot average for the first floor, 8-foot minimum, 11-foot average for the second floor.
I thought it was 20 minimum.
This is our 3050, so our 3050 has just the one 25-foot setback, as opposed to 16, 15, 22, and R12, which has a 20, 23-foot average.
Okay, so 25 is the minimum.
Correct.
All right, and then the question that I have is that when I'm looking at the southeast elevation, disregarding, the design and everything, and the measurement that I'm seeing from the low point, which is on the left, shown as 26 feet, wouldn't that dimension be measured to the ridge line of the facade that is facing Pickens? I mean, the overall building?
I'm sorry, Board Member Malikian, what
So,
page are you looking at?
This elevation, or any one of them, this one is going up to this point, but wouldn't it go to that point? Because that one is higher?
It would
so-
be for
so
the overall building.
Overall height?
Yes,
Okay,
overall height,
okay,
correct.
okay. So then if it is 25, or then, no, 26 plus
26.
another 5, so it should be okay. It seems that there is the way it looks on the south, or the same elevation, or both elevations, it seems like there's a break in the grade.
There is, yes, there is
But
a
there are,
slope difference
six-
or grade difference there.
So
Hence the steps in the common area.
okay,
on the
they're actually
west
calling
side.
this as a 2-foot retaining wall.
I believe there is a retaining wall there, yes.
It's actually 3-foot retaining wall.
And some steps as well, which are shown on the landscape plan.
Okay. And they can have a 3-foot retaining wall in the setback.
We'll look into it during plan check, but they can have a wall, correct? And because this is kind of unique because you typically don't have slopes in a multifamily zone, there may not be a specific regulation for retaining walls in multifamily zones, like there are in R1R and R1. In R1, you can have a 5-foot retaining wall in the interior setback, and then we know all the rules for R1R. We'll have to look at it a little more closely and see how we would interpret that during plan check.
And my last question, being that it is a multifamily, you're allowed to park on grade, correct? So you don't have to.
Yes, because there's only 2 units.
Okay.
There is a code section in the parking chapter where it talks about if you have, for example, more than 4 units, 4 or more, or for each, I believe, the
Is it 25?
2,500 or more than 2,500 square feet of lot area, you can have 1 dwelling unit for each 2,500.
Got it.
And if that's the case, if you exceed that, then you would have to have subterranean parking. But that's not the case here.
Thank you. Okay, so, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Not in reference to this project, but what you just said sparked a question in my mind. On that 2,500 minimum square foot
Yes.
item as it relates to on-grade parking?
Yes, it determines whether or not, that's the triggering point, whether or not you're allowed to have on-grade parking or whether or not you need subterranean parking.
And forgive me, you're going to need to speak into the microphone.
Okay, so say if you had a 10-unit, but if the density was less than 2,500 square feet, lot area per unit, then you could actually go on grade, is that?
We'll have to do the calculation, but the idea is not to have that. It's actually to have the subterranean parking, especially because you would have more than 4. Villia, if you would like to mention something as well along those lines.
She's trying to figure out
Correct
where
the
the noise
audio,
is coming
why
from.
the noise is coming. Board Member Simonian, the code is such that if you have more than 4 units on a lot in the same structure, you'd have to have subterranean
Okay.
garage. If you have, let's say, for instance, 1 or 2 units, and the density per unit is greater than 1 unit for every 2,500 square
Then you
feet
got to have
of lot.
subterranean again.
If it's less than 2,500, then you would need subterranean.
Okay.
If it's more than, you can have at-grade parking.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, can we have the applicant, Marie Matthews?
Good evening. My name's Demarie Matthews, and I just want to share with you guys that probably the biggest challenge of designing this particular 2-unit condo, as Milka referred to, is the amount of trees and the oak trees that we're trying to protect on the property. So what we did was, the very first thing we did was have the city arborist, Jeremy Kahn, come and work with us on site and determine where we could build, basically set the footprint for us. And then that was further impacted by the setbacks that are required for this type of development. So it became quite a challenging project, but what we wanted to do was have a look that was single family in respect to the neighborhood. So that's part of why the 2 facades are different from one another, even though it's one structure. And the other is that when you divide the lot in half and you look at where the 2 units are, there's really 2 different sets of site conditions. The Pickens side is far more significantly impacted by a very large oak tree. So it had to call for a different design. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Do you have any questions? I do, actually. Can you explain the complete difference in the facade elevation between front or the Pickens and
Yeah, why Pickens is so different from Manhattan. Right. So Pickens has a significant oak tree to the side of it that we had to protect.
I'm talking about the front facade rather than the sides. I'm talking about the front facing Pickens versus the Manhattan. Yeah.
Well, Manhattan could be elongated, whereas Pickens had to be shortened because of the tree that's right next to it. Does that make sense?
Just talking about the width.
The width of Pickens, the footprint at the Pickens side is significantly reduced because of the tree that's adjacent. And when you put the garage there, we are left with a minimal amount of space before the drip line that we have to protect for the oak tree. And the Manhattan side does not have an oak tree drip line that we have to protect.
So what you're saying is the setback and then all the articulations you created here, it wasn't possible doing it here because of the side oak tree?
Exactly. Yeah, and we did work with the design committee in the planning department to create as much undulation as we could. We made some concessions to pull the second floor back a little bit over the entry to try and break that up a little bit.
Okay. Well, look. Thank you.
Thank you.
I actually have a question.
Okay.
In reference to the windows, are you proposing wood windows throughout?
Graham, these are vinyl? Fiberglass, that's right. We went with fiberglass.
Fiberglass. And as far as the wood surrounds and wood sills, or how are you dealing with the wood surrounds and the window sills?
They'll be painted.
And is it actually a hardy material that's
It's
around?
all hardy material.
I see you're going to have hardy trim on the sides and some sort of a hardy trim on the sill, or would you have an actual sill?
It says wood trim on the
Well, you know what? Are we doing wood? We're doing hardy siding, and I believe we can do wood trim at the fascia board. At the fascia can be wood, and the wood trim around the windows. we're flexible on those things. It's painted, so if there's a preference by the board, we can.
I think it's a staff condition to do
I-
wood
It's
wood
kind
trim
of, yeah.
That's fine.
frames.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Grant Michaels?
Good evening, board members. My name is Grant Michaels. I'm the president of the Montrose of the. Good evening. I'm Grant Michaels, president of the Montrose Verdugo City Spar Heights Neighborhood Association. We submitted a comment letter, and while we appreciate many of the design features, including the lack of second-story balconies for privacy concerns, the palette, the craftsman style, I did speak with Milka Toledo, the case planner. The plans that were posted, the details as far as dimensions were difficult to read. We do have a couple of concerns relating to the slope from north to south. I wasn't able to get accurate measurements, but my rough estimation is the slope from north to south is about 6 feet. And the retaining wall at Manhattan is 5 feet. Looking at Pickens, the garage that currently is there now sits at street level. Looking at the building elevations, the Pickens height is approximately 22 feet. The Manhattan height is 25. Looking at the concern I have is viewing the building from Manhattan, that 25-foot building height and the 5-foot retaining wall would present as 29 feet and present a more massive appearance viewed from Manhattan as compared to Pickens for the same two-story structure. I wanted to try and get a better understanding of the site planning, of how the retaining walls were going to be presented. Looking at the renderings, I'm not able to get a better understanding of that. Looking at the 3D renderings, the Pickens side, it actually appears that there is a slope going up to the driveway, and wanted the board to try and consider a way to reduce the visual impact of height as viewed from Manhattan. Additionally, we are concerned about the Pickens facade. Looking at that,
Sorry about that.
no problem. The Manhattan facade, we appreciate the design. We think it's a good design that's compatible with the neighborhood. The Pickens facade, if that is to be considered a frontage, that doesn't look like the front of a house to us. We would like to see a little more articulation, particularly a setback of the second story, slightly like we see with the Manhattan facade. And I'm trying to get a better understanding of the conditions of what would affect that facade. This is of concern to us as that block consists of all through lots. Currently, the way it is designed for those lots that front Manhattan, Pickens appears as would be an alleyway to access the rear garages. So there is a separate freestanding garage on Pickens. If this duplex or the higher density continues along this block, we are concerned of having facades that face Pickens that don't look like the front of a house. Thank you.
I have
We do have a question.
You mentioned your mass and bulk.
Mr. Simonian, I'm sorry, with the noise, you have to really speak into the microphone so that we can record what you're saying. So I apologize.
You mentioned that you had some concerns or comments really about the mass and bulk as you look at it from Manhattan because of the 5-foot retaining wall and then the mass of the building from Manhattan and then how that gets, I guess, compounded is what you were referring to from Pickens. When I'm looking at the drawings, I don't see that the house is raised on Pickens, though. It seems as though it's on the same. Excuse us.
If you can turn off all the microphones that are not being used.
Okay. It's done. Okay.
We apologize about that. Hopefully, we'll have no more interruptions with the microphone, but we can't guarantee it.
You spoke too soon.
So, as I was saying earlier, when we looking at it from the rear, away from Manhattan, it seems as the building is on grade. I'm not seeing steps going up. But you had mentioned possibly lowering the building from that point of view. So do you have any suggestions, or have you noticed something that we should focus on that end of lowering the height of the building?
What I was looking to get better understanding of, from north to south, the lot seems to slope approximately 6 feet. Again, I couldn't read the numbers from the plan. The height of the two buildings at Pickens and Manhattan seem to drop possibly a foot. I'd be looking to see if there was a way to have that 6-foot slope reflected in the building design following the North Glendale Community Plan of having multi-unit buildings follow the topography of the land, rather than building from one elevation and building flat across, where the downslope appears significantly higher from street level at that perspective.
Now I understand your direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We don't have any more cards, so
Can we have the
yes. Can you please come up?
Is this for the rebuttal or to ask questions?
I think we want to ask.
Probably both.
Sure.
No, I just wanted to cover the point you started about
Yeah.
this little.
On the Manhattan side, we are maintaining the existing finished floor height of the house that's there right now. So any additional height would be in the fact that we're adding a second story. And the elevation, as compared to the renderings, is a bit misleading because you're seeing a roof line that's about 100 feet back on the Pickens. So it looks like it keeps kind of stepping up, whereas at eye level, it would read like the perspectives. You wouldn't see those roofs way forward on the Pickens side from Manhattan side. In terms of concessions, we could drop the finished floor maybe a foot if we went to a slab. The current house is up on a raised footing, so we could.
But the height of the first floor is 9 feet, so you want to maintain the 9 foot?
If
Then
possible,
drop
I'd
the
like to
slab.
maintain the 9 feet and drop the finished floor by a foot. If we need to drop the overall height,
This would be on Pickens, the building.
this would be on the
on
Manhattan
Manhattan.
side.
On the Manhattan.
We would end up dropping the entire structure a foot, actually. I mean, if we're going to do a slab, we would do the entire
The-
structure on a slab.
The question that I have is, on the site plan, I really don't see any retaining walls or any kind of a step as it's being depicted in your rendering, from the site elevation rendering.
On the landscape plan,
No, if you look at the site elevation, you have 2 steps here, and then you have 1 step. And as I'm looking at this, you have 1 step, and I'm trying to figure out some of the finished grades, and I guess there's going to be some cut and fill here that you're proposing.
that's correct. Hmm.
And there's a cut here as well, but then from there on, it's sloping down. Whereas on this elevation, there's a step. So without having the proper retaining walls, the only place that it may be some line there, it's shown here as a 2-foot retaining wall, but then when you look at the elevations here, it's actually 3-foot retaining wall. So it's kind of a confusing site plan, not knowing where these breaks are and how much they are.
According to the landscape design, it should be a 2-foot retaining wall. My elevation might be responding to the finished floor heights. The two units have about a 3-foot height difference. But we can slope that more gently.
You're actually showing from this point, you're going down a foot, and then from there, you're going down to 3 feet, and then from there, you're going down another 3 feet.
So it should be a
This
2-foot
point.
retaining wall, and it's a 12-inch discrepancy there that I need to show a more gentle slope instead of flat where I have doors coming out.
How much grading are you doing?
Very little. The site is already sloped, and we're just basically trying to flatten it so we can have.
What's little? Is it less than 100 cubic yards? Is it more
Yes.
than 200, 500?
It's less than 100 cubic yards. We're just cutting it a little bit to get some side doors in at about the midpoint of the lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I had a
Yes.
question as it relates to reducing mass and height of the building. So you mentioned that you might be able to shave a foot off the structure. What are some other ideas you could think of very quickly as far as lowering the height of the building?
If it came to it, we could drop the ceiling height on the first floor as well, from 9 to 8.
But if you wanted to avoid reducing the ceiling height, grading-wise,
Oh, grading.
because let's say if you graded a little bit more than what you're doing now, what do you think you could achieve?
I don't think we can because of the oak trees. We need to protect the roots. I can let Jeremy discuss that. Maybe that's not a problem, but in general, we're trying to not dig down on this property very much.
And okay, and as far as the roof, what are the roof pitches at the moment?
Where are the roof?
What are the roof pitches?
It's all a 3 and I believe a 3
So
to 12.
That's
It's just
so
a
you
real,
can't go
yeah.
much less than that.
That's one of the reasons for choosing a craftsman, trying to
It's
be
actually
modest
4
with
and
the
12.
roof.
4
Is it
and
4 and
12?
12? Okay, 4 and 12.
So we might be able to have some savings there. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
actually, maybe if you could stay up here for.
That's fine.
I have a question for the arborist.
Yes.
Based on your observation of the existing trees, can the site be further graded if the intent is to reduce the height of the building? Can the site be further graded and not damage the existing roots of the oak trees?
No, it would damage the roots of the existing oak trees.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Going back to Jeremy, if you have, I do have a question for you. So it seems like there's lack of information on the retaining walls and the cut and fill. There's about some change there based on the section that I've seen, because I don't have a grading plan. Have you reviewed the plans based on these retaining walls that are proposing? They're going right under the oak trees and everything else. So
I have not seen a grading plan either. I do have a copy of the elevation plans, but I've mostly been going off the indigenous tree report
Okay.
and the site plans.
now, the question that I have is, it seems like it's mostly pertaining to this, the Pickens side. So it seems like there's a drip line that goes over the second floor already. And so based on what I'm hearing is you've reviewed it and you're fine with the way it's being proposed. It's already impacting under the oak tree, and so on the ground level, it's the same as that. So is there going to be a huge impact if this is shifted over approximately a couple of feet so that this angle is in line with the back of this? And the reason that I'm going is that because it's going to affect the exterior and so forth. So is there a big impact on that?
The encroachment's almost the same. I mean, it's still within the drip line, so I wouldn't think so.
Okay, that's all.
If it was a question between eliminating it or putting it in, obviously that's different.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we can keep that in mind, and then we'll talk when we... All right, Mr. Bellion, would you like to start?
Overall, I like the design. I think design and details are done well. I like the idea of keeping being consistent with the neighborhood. designing it as if it's two separate single-family. Yeah, designing it as two separate single families, even though it's one building, but you're creating two frontage, which is consistent with the single-family neighborhood. So I like that. I think there are a lot of good stuff going on with this project, which is that as board members we can appreciate taking the effort of dealing with designing around the oak trees. We always get projects where people, the easiest way is just, oh, we're going to take out 2 oak trees and plant few oak trees to replace them. You guys are not doing that. You took the hard way and you designed around that, and that's not easy. That's big constraint. So I think there are no grade. Staff reports say no grading is proposed. You mentioned less than cubic 100, so minimum grading. So I appreciate that fact as well. I know that the lot is sloping, so you kind of like broke the building. You followed the slope. That's also a good thing. Initially, when I looked at the overall square footage, if you add the garages, we're looking at, I think, 3,700 square feet, and it looked a little bit big for the size of the lot, but I think it's done well, it's broken up, it's detailed well. There are a few things that I wish you've dealt with a little better, and I agree with Grant 100% about dealing with the facades. I mean, you look at one facade and it looks like a frontage. You look at the other one and it's just not there. And I understand you're restricted because of that, but I guess with the new information that Mr. Malikian brought out, maybe you have room to manipulate the other facade to get it to the same level, add more detail, make it feel like a front, because that side of the street and the people that live in that portion, they deserve the same courtesy as the others. You know, you want to keep it kind of even. By no means I'm saying do this identical frontage. I like the idea that you're doing 2 frontages and they're different. It's just the amount of detail and design that needs to get to the same level. And since you've done it in one area, we're 100% sure you can do it in the second part. The other things I wanted to talk about is side elevations. I think you have a similar issue with that. Like one of the side elevations, your symmetry is better than the other. Like I think the northwest elevation, you need to look at it and just look at the symmetry. Like you have these like skinny columns at the ends that coming down. They just don't look very. The proportions don't work like for me, and maybe the window placements. You've mentioned that you're going to frame the windows, which is a staff report, so I'm fine with that. Overall, I think it's a good project, and as I mentioned before, there are too many good things going for it. I like the idea that both projects have front patios, both projects have private entries. You didn't do any balconies on the second floor. That's appreciated as well. These are my comments, and I would like to see what my colleagues have to say.
Thank you. Simone?
I had similar comments as well. Overall, I think just starting out generally is the Manhattan facade seems to read very well. It does have articulation. It has design features that are consistent with the craftsman style. The porch, the entry, the proportions of it, and most importantly, which I'll get to, is the roof line works very nicely off of Manhattan. And it was kind of nice to have the arborist input as well as we're looking at all the oak trees, because a lot of effort has been taken to try to accommodate the existing oaks, which we appreciate. And so on the other hand, though, as we look at Pickens, that facade and the roof design over that unit, I think has some room for improvement. And if that facade is improved and that roof line is improved, much in line with the same typology as presented on Manhattan, it will actually reduce the height of the building aesthetically, because as we're looking at, the Manhattan facade, you notice the roof in the background, which is really, the roof kind of over the living space off of Pickens. And if that orientation is switched and some more undulation is done on the facade, then in reality you're reducing the amount of roof you're seeing from Manhattan, and it's much more consistent roof line. It would be great if you're able to drop it by a foot, the finished floor by a foot, by going into the crawl space. I wouldn't really want to prescribe lowering the finish height of the living area, but if you're able to reduce it through the crawl space, as you indicated, I think that would help. Overall, I think the way to look at it is the overall mass of the building and the roof line should kind of conform. And then if you're having problems with some of those side porches and side entrances, maybe with the use of some smaller garden walls, you could kind of create the landings that you need. But in a way, you got to kind of look at the overall site, design the grading in a way that minimizes your height of the building, and then try to accommodate the actual landings of the side doors. Like I said, that could easily be done with some garden walls to create those openings you need, and to make sure those heights work accordingly. So overall, I would support the project if we're able to rework the Pickens facade and also undulate it differently, and also rework the roof line, which I think all kind of happens at the same time. Those are my comments.
Thank you. I'm trying to assess the site plan and the amount of work that is being proposed, and it's fairly difficult for me to kind of get a grasp on. But I've been trying to put together some ideas about what is happening between the landscape drawing and the site plan that is shown. So I really think that the proper site plan needs to be put together so the city arborists can actually fully understand what is being proposed. Some of the grading and the retaining walls are being proposed under the existing oak trees. Also, to me, they would need to address some of the retaining wall that is off of Manhattan, how they're going to cut that off, because that thing is not really stable enough for it to be cut off, and how it's being wrapped around as it's being shown on the landscape plan. So a proposal should be given of how they're going to be removing a 5-foot retaining wall or so, or whatever the dimension is. So it's kind of vague on that part. As far as the Pickens elevation, and the reason that I've asked those questions is that and I'll try to explain this if I can, if this portion of the stairs and the patio, the covered porch and the stairs be pushed back at least a couple of feet so it's in line with the back of the garage, what it'll do is it'll allow to move the entire section here back. And so what it'll do is it'll allow you to push this back, create something similar to this. At the same time, I don't like to get into the bedrooms and everything, but if it's going to help make this project exterior work better, right now this is not really selling the project for me. So it's not doing anything. So I think that there's definitely room to improve and be able to move this back. So in order for the roof to be wrapped around as it has been in Manhattan elevation. So the detailing here lacks completely the effort that has been placed from this side. But there are ways, and the comment that I got from the applicant that trying to avoid the roots of damaging the oak trees. Most of the stuff we're proposing is on the second floor rather than the ground floor. So I think the ground floor will be designed with the observation of arborists being on site. So I don't have a problem with that. I agree with the comments, some of the details and everything that it's being proposed. So other than that, as far as the height, I'm fine with lowering. I mean, eating up away from the crawl space, and be able to kind of differentiate the stepping of and playing with the contour of the hill. So it's not going to jeopardize the design nor impact any of the. It's actually going to be less impact to the trees as well.
Right.
So.
Which kind of dovetails with what you were saying. If there is a detailed site plan depicting the retaining
Right.
walls as well, then they'll be able to carve that out.
Yeah. There is a discrepancy between some of the elevations that are being indicated on the landscaping and the elevations. The only elevations that I see as far as grades are shown literally on the elevation rather than on the ground site plan. So it's kind of difficult to locate the retaining walls and how much cut and fill that they're proposing and so on and so forth. So that's going to be important for staff to look at once it gets ready. So other than that, we're ready for hear the comments and the motion, please.
Should we hear staff's
Yeah.
conditions?
I'll go over some and then whatever I miss, please. So I have mainly, it seems like, to improve the Pickens Street facade. So again, by adding more details, thereby designing a more attractive design that enhances the neighborhood. And that can be achieved through modifying also the roof as well in that area. So creating more roof lines similar to the Manhattan side, so we can kind of use that facade as a guide. Doesn't mean a mirror image of it, but similar. And that can also be achieved, improving that facade by dropping, and I heard drop the finished floor by 1 foot, as she mentioned, getting rid of the crawl space, or by lowering the finished height of the living area. Is that
Not
correct?
the finished height, but the actual, the 9 foot.
The 9 foot.
8 foot. So it'll lower that, it's either or, so.
Forgive me, board members.
The ground level is 9 feet, floor to ceiling. And if they want to keep the crawl space, they can reduce that to 8 foot and keep the crawl space, but, I mean, it's up to them.
And I'm going to just interject just for my own clarification and to make sure that we have this down correct. I had something similar along the lines of redesigning the front facade facing Pickens to better reflect a street front design such as that of the Manhattan elevations in terms of the roof design, the articulation details, and especially that of the upper floors. Now, dropping the floors, I know there was a discussion in terms of having a slat versus, but that's a different elevation altogether.
Right.
So just to make that distinction, is that, okay, so this would be a separate condition in regards to the Manhattan.
I guess before we get to the second part, which is what you just were referring to, that deals with clear space reduction from 9 feet to 8 feet, or the reduction of the crawl space, which is that separate condition. I think Board Member Malikian also indicated pushing back the facade on Pickens to create the sort of roof line that exists over the porch and the garage on Manhattan as well.
Now, the pushing back on the second floor or just that
Second
portion
floor.
above the entryway?
Second floor.
Because
Second floor.
just the second floor. Okay, so
Yeah,
actually creating a break in the front facade.
Exactly.
On the Pickens side.
On the Pickens.
On the
Yeah.
Pickens side.
Create
Yes.
this kind of a roof.
Right, similar to the Manhattan side.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I got that. And another one was to submit an accurate site plan and elevation for the site plan that accurately depicts site walls, topography, retaining, that's all part of site walls, retaining walls. I would include also spot elevations, so staff
That's
can
what I was
actually...
going to say, not elevation, it's
Spot elevations, correct.
Right.
So we can accurately see what the existing conditions and proposed once they introduce the cut and fill as well. So we'll need that information as well. I heard something about, maybe we touched upon that already, consider modifying the interior floor plan. I think that came from Board Member Malikian.
I mean, there are ways that they can do that.
Okay, we won't.
But pushing the stair, that section, the porch and the stairs back.
But it's not a condition because
Well, it is a condition.
You want a
In
condition.
order for them to be able to break
Okay.
the
So I'll put as,
second
for
floor.
example, by doing
Exactly.
the floor plan
Exactly.
modification as well.
And,
Okay.
and Jeremy already confirmed that that would not be a
In case they haven't, because I may have it in a different file, but if it's okay to have them include a cross-section as well.
Absolutely. I mean,
We'll need that for plan check. And show consistency between site plan and landscape plan as well, including all the steps that are shown on the one plan needs to reflect on the other. And there was also a comment about proportions of the columns.
I had to reevaluate the northwest interior elevation in terms of the symmetry, fenestration pattern, and the column proportions.
Good.
And that's all I have. I don't know if
Plus
there's...
the conditions you guys had, right?
Correct. Thank you. And that was regarding submitting a cross-section view and submit information on the light fixtures that are proposed. Do I have a motion, or would you like to
I
add?
remember a condition with framing. Okay, so one of the staff conditions is to be the windows to be wood frame. Is that correct?
And that's what it is, right?
Allow me to
But I
read
thought
it.
On the
they
elevation.
To be,
didn't the applicant say fiberglass?
they
The
said hardy
windows are-
board for the frame, hardy board and sills.
That's not what it says here.
It-
It
though the
says
condition-
hardy board for the horizontal siding, and it says wood trim, all doors and windows, typical.
Right.
Correct.
But the way I'm reading the condition is it says submit a window detail cross-section to show all windows to be constructed in a wood frame,
And include exterior grid.
grid. So, but I thought the applicant mentioned that these are fiberglass windows.
And staff is recommending wood.
And that's what I'm saying, let's clarify that as a condition.
I think it's the wood frame around the windows.
right.
Okay,
so
so they're
we're-
the wood surround of the windows, not the windows themselves.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. That was my.
Okay.
So typical, like a block frame, having that window recessed within that wood frame and opening.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay. So then the
gonna do-
fiberglass windows as presented is fine.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. So do I have a motion? And I'm assuming, go ahead. Whoever's going to make the motion.
I'll move to approve the project with those conditions.
I second that.
Okay, so that was a motion to approve with the conditions by Board Member Simonian and a second by Board Member Benlian. Board Member Simonian?
Yes.
Board Member Benlian?
Yes.
Chairperson Malikian?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
We do have two different minutes, one from April 13.
Correct. We have the minutes from March the 23rd,
Or
where board members Benlian, Charchian, and Malikian were present.
so,
Which,
so I need to pass the gavel to
Correct.
Mr. Simonian, and then we make the motion. So I will pass this along to you, sir. And
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
second,
okay, so motion passes with a 2-0 vote.
For the record, the gavel is being passed back to Chairperson Malek.
Thank you, Mr. Simonian. And we also have the meeting minutes from April the 13th, 2017, and board members Benlian, Charchian, Malikian, and Simonian were present, so all four.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second them.
Motion by board member Benlian, a second by board member Simonian. In terms of a roll call, board member Benlian,
Yes.
board member Simonian,
Yes.
Chairman Malikian,
yes.
The motion passes 3-0. There are no other items on this evening's agenda.
And I guess we were adjourned.
Thank you very much.